There we go. We're live.
Hello and welcome to Moreness-Culture. Good morning, Syl. Good morning, Grain. Good morning to whoever is going to watch us live and will watch us recorded. If by chance you are here live, please leave a comment. Just say hi, hello, a smiley face, or wave hand. Anything will work for us. Just show your presence. Just wave, because by doing so, you are going to just put emphasis for the algorithm that okay, this is something you are interested in, and this is a big deal. Yesterday we were talking about this, that how emphasis works for online algorithm, which ultimately uh, is kind of a same for life algorithm. This is how people, mostly people call it like or assume it as law of attraction, because where you are putting attention, where you are focusing on, and universe just at your service, continuously watching where you are focusing and bring more and more of it or alike things in your life. So please, if you find some value and if you want to have more value, more of like this, uh, make the emphasis very clear for the universe and for the online algorithm. Anyway, what we are doing here. Nowadays, we are busy. It's a long, huge project. We are busy with we are doing the capital R reading of Don Juan's life lessons. People call it life lessons. Some people call it transformation techniques. Some people call it explore a new paradigm. So many things I have just read. Okay, people saying about things. What actually for me is Don Juan share the ability and how to do perspective shifting. This is what they are doing. They are not doing anything else but the perspective shifting and making other people and of course themselves also to be able to do perspective shifting. This is what really helpful, valuable for me. Sorry, not helpful, valuable for me. And we are busy with the capital R reading of Carlos Castaneda's books about Don Juan. And we are doing this with a very specific intent to connect with Don Juan. Yes, we are interested. Of course, the books are valuable, and especially the second book we are going to start soon. Syl mentioned that many times that okay, he's very interested because this is the real stuff for him. This is where everything will be very different and valuable, more valuable. But we are doing it for the specific intent to connect with Don Juan. Connecting with anyone is very precious. I'm trying to find appropriate words to elucidate this because just today I was resting, taking a bit of nap, and I was listening to some authors and people, motivational speakers, and in that scrolling, I found a short video. The guy was saying that what is opposite of addiction? He says, no, sobriety is not the opposite of addiction. And that was interesting for me. Like, okay, what he's going to say next.
I would say it's deliberateness.
Yes.
Choice.
Okay. Okay.
Not
And
choice,
he says,
deliberateness.
yes.
Wow.
And he says, okay, I will come back to this point, sir. Very, very profound point, yes. But what he says, opposite of addiction is connectedness. And I was like, seriously? And then, of course, he elaborated a bit about this. Because he was talking about specific addictions. He says that people get into addiction when they are not connected with their current present life, circumstances, and people around them. And in other words, with the reality, quote unquote.
Interesting.
And I like that because this is what you're saying. So connectedness is in terms of in this specific situation. Yes, when we are connected. Why it is so valuable? Because we can have multiple perspectives, the core of it. And when you can have more perspective, how can you going to be stuck in just one? Yes. Addiction is just like really getting stuck in some specific situation. This is what addiction is. It could be anything. But why? Because if you are truly capital C connected with people, with the world around you, with, of course, the circumstances, reality, whatever you want to call it, with life in general, with the universe, you will have multiple, you will be able to have multiple perspectives. And that having access to multiple perspectives is the real antidote for the addiction. How can you get stuck, deliberately get stuck into one situation, just one perspective? And that was, okay, he didn't elaborate this, of course. He was just like, okay, yes, it was just a short video, you know that, okay, how long they are. He was just saying that the opposite of sobriety is just connectedness.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this, and then I'm like, how it could be. Of course, some people have like really not helpful, not helpful people around them. Unfortunately, this is how situation in life is for many people. But still, if they are connected, capital C connected with the world around them, with their own life, with themselves, they will be able to have multiple perspectives. And once people can have multiple perspectives, it will be very, very, very difficult for them to get stuck, to get addicted to something.
Exactly. Because when you're not connected, you lose sight of the whole. You lose sight of the bigger picture.
Yes.
That's, to me, capital C connection is when you are connected to life, the universe, spirit, energy, intent, all of it. Yes. That's the greater whole. Now, here's the question. How do we know? How do we perceive? How do we connect to that which is greater than ourselves? By definition, when something is bigger than you can't see it. You can't see that which is bigger than you. It's too big. The only way to do it is through multiple perspectives, as Beena said. Yeah. You could say, well, I could zoom very far out and see it from far away. When you see the world from far away, you only see one side of the world. At best, you can see half of it. Yeah. You're still not seeing all of it. See? Need multiple perspectives. Yeah. So when things are complex, when they're big, when they're large, that's the way to know that which you otherwise cannot, by getting multiple perspectives. This is the incredible secret. Also, to understand that you don't have to have every single perspective needed. You just need to have enough. Your brain will put it together. It will construct the inside. It will construct the complexity. It will put it together and you get to know. Yeah. It's an incredible skill that we have, power that the brain has to put things together and create the whole out of those multiple perspectives. It needs at least enough for that to happen. Yeah. Don't have to have all of them. Very powerful, very powerful. Fantastic point, Beena. Fantastic point. This connectivity, it is absolutely huge. I'm not quite sure how this guy connected it to addiction, lack of connectivity. I have to think about that some.
See, yes, that's why I mentioned that it was a very short video, and he just said that. And I was thinking, like, how this makes sense. Okay, yes, it gives me another perspective on that, the value of community, as like we say that, okay, to have Moreness culture around you, to build that community, to have that Moreness culture. Yes, and of course it is going to be very, very, very helpful. But still, I was not clear about the specific point he was making with the addiction. And then I said, okay, so the value for the connectedness is to have the access to be able to have multiple perspectives. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
So that's why I was, so this connection, I made it by myself, that this is the way I think. Of course, it is going to be many more, and I don't know what his perspective is. I would love to have more details about that. But I was thinking about that okay, how he made connection. And then because I was receptive, so I was like, okay, yes. And then I think, oh, okay, so yes, because addiction is having a limited perspective.
Yeah.
and feeling
I mean,
and feeling
I can't.
another way.
Yeah.
Yes, so that's why it doesn't make any sense to me. So that's why it was interesting. Anyway.
For me too. Now, I can't say he's saying that you're addicted when you are not connected to the whole, to moreness. Now, and he's not saying why he sees. Now, I can
Yes.
sort of say, all right, maybe he's understanding or the logic, or not maybe, but if I look at being addicted as a substitute for being connected to moreness, to a whole, to a greater, to something larger. And when you're not, you have that loss in you, and you're looking to fill that loss via whatever it is you're connected to.
Yes.
That would make sense then, yes? So
Yes.
as a substitute and as a need. Now, when you connected to the whole, you don't feel needy and desperate like that. But being disconnected from the whole could make
Yes.
you feel that way, right?
Yes.
In other words, I don't have that same consuming focus that addicts have when I'm connected to the moreness. I just enjoy it. I just like it. And it's enough. It's the lack that makes them get addicted, because they're seeking something they cannot find. So they go more and more and more, and they keep going. And that's what makes for the addiction, right? Seeking something which cannot be found where you're seeking it. Yeah?
Yes.
So in that sense, that makes sense then. All right. Very good. Let us go and do our reading. Let's go and do our reading.
Yes. And this is very interesting what you were saying about the bigger picture and the overall perspective, because nowadays we have this amazing cameras we have available, and we see the macro photography and the micro photography, and then we see really zoomed in and zoom out also. So in the childhood, I used to be like really amazed by that, how these ants can really just climb on the smooth walls. For me, they were very smooth, and I was amazed by ants' skill, that how they can actually do that. But now when we see pictures of really zoomed in, like really, I don't know how many times, and then we see,
Microscopic view, yeah.
yes, and then we see that the smooth wall, according to me, is actually not smooth.
Correct.
And
Correct.
an ant can find pockets and hooks, and they can climb. Okay, for them it's a very tough ride, but it's also easy for them, because they can just pull themselves and grab all those things. So the perspective for me was completely different, and the perspective for the ant is completely different.
Isn't
And
that
this is
incredible? Yeah.
it is really amazing.
Perspective shifting is such an incredible power. It changes your life. It doesn't give you power over anything, but it is a power nonetheless, because it's the power of understanding, the power of insight, this power of discernment, and the power of understanding. When you can see things from someone else's perspective, you can understand what's going on with them. It's transformative. It's completely and utterly transformative. Wonderfully so.
Yes.
Absolutely wonderfully so. It's a huge deal. It's a huge deal. You know, I say I cannot over stress the importance, the value, the fantastic, just incredibleness of perspective shifting. How useful it is. Yeah.
Yes.
It is just valuable. Never mind just useful also. It is valuable. Super valuable.
What Joseph is saying there, one of the criticisms of the greater Don Juan cosmology is that it is lesser focused on individual perspective and specific life ways. Very little about publicly pushing that knowledge out into the greater growth communities.
Yes.
I realize that you are working to change that.
Yes. You know, it is a big deal. But you know, I have to look at Don Juan's lineage in the context that, in its historical context. At the time that these lineages came to be, that was a time that was exceedingly, to the extreme, exceedingly intolerant of any kind of difference whatsoever. You could not go against the prevailing order in any way. There was no freedom of speech. There was the exact opposite. You had to toe the line, you had to be the same. And not only from an ideological point of view, but from a extreme tribalness point of view, right? When you didn't conform, when you weren't part of the tribe, then the mentality of opposites, then you were, if you weren't with us, you were against us. So you were immediately a threat. And because physical survival, inter-tribal, inter-whoever warfare was a very big part of things, that was a survival mechanism taken to its extreme, got a bit ridiculous. But if you, in other words, in those societies, if you expressed any kind of difference and different opinion, that was the end of you. So this lineage and keeping it exceedingly private and not sharing it with anybody, this was a matter of survival. It was the only way you could pursue moreness and more knowledge, right? You didn't have that luxury. You couldn't really risk just sharing it with even casual people, because you get into trouble and you say, well, I'll get out of trouble if I give up somebody else, that kind of stuff. You trade that information. It becomes exceedingly valuable information to have in a situation where getting into trouble was routine. Yeah. So it makes sense, in the historical context. Yeah. I mean, we don't know that much detail going all the way back to the Toltec days of the lineage, but certainly all the time through the colonial era, we know exactly what was going on, right? And Don Juan says some point later on, he says that many of the lineage ahead of him, they joined the priesthood, because that was about the only place where you were truly safe, or at least as safe as you could go, right? Because when you were a priest, you still had a little bit of power and influence over, the soldiers and the officials and whoever, right? You had something to countermand. But when you were part of the bureaucracy and the establishment and the army, you had incredible power. I mean, you had power over life and death, very literally, over, the people that you were ruling, as they weren't really considered people, right? So, yeah. But yeah, we are looking to share. We are looking to share. Yeah, yeah. Now, we're not necessarily looking to share Don Juan's cosmology. We're looking to share Moreness-Culture, because in Don Juan's cosmology, it's very particular to the individual who is Carlos. For instance, Benito, one of the other apprentices, I think it is Benito, I remember correctly. Well, one of them, they didn't need all of this stuff with the power plants. That's it. They didn't have any need for it. They one time and that was it, end of done. And after that, no more, right? So Carlos is a special case, and not just with the power plants, but with everything else. Carlos learns very slowly in terms of internal change. He's got lots of psychological issues, his inferiority complex, and his ambition and all the stuff. It makes him a bit of a mess. Makes him a very big mess, and makes him a fool. And so Don Juan has a hard time with Carlos, but that's to our advantage, right? So when we look at Carlos, it's essential to understand that Carlos is a tool of the universe. Yes, a little bit of a play on the pun intended there, right? He's a tool of the universe. And this is a big deal, because otherwise we wouldn't get all of this from him. But he does get Don Juan's approval to publish, to put it out there. Yeah, Don Juan, he says, put it out there and then forget about it. Then you'll be free of it, because he carries these notes of his around. So Don Juan, Ross says, Joseph says, sorry, Don Joseph, it's probably vestiges of this negative scrutiny or judgmentalist in the modern day fundamentalist Christian community. Yes, I think many of them would see Don Juan's knowledge as coming from the devil. Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. When this came out, and much later, when I started reading, I kept this very private because, I was in a very, well, the equivalent of Christian fundamentalism. Well, this was in South Africa, very conservative. The whole society was much more church dominated than here, at least well, at that time I was in the city already, but still, I started reading this while I was in the army, doing national service. 2 years, a long time. But anyway, so yeah, I kept it to myself. And for many years, I never shared that I was reading this or had read this. So yeah, it wasn't something that occasionally here and there, yes, but you had to kind of be circumspect. Yeah. Uh, Joseph says, I'd be interested to hear how strict Muslims react to Carlos. I don't know, because, as far as I know, it wasn't something that was big in the Muslim world. Yeah. So it hasn't gotten that attention the way it did in the West. So,
I can tell you. I can tell you.
yeah.
If by a strict Muslim, if you mean that like really the what is the word, extremist, if you want to say that extremist Muslims, they would say haram. No more discussion. Sorry, end of the discussion right there. Haram. Okay. And if you want to say that, okay, Muslims, practicing Muslims, they would think about this, because anything which alters your state of mind, where you cannot differentiate between uh, or you can, sorry, how to say that, I'm struggling to find the word for that. Yes, okay, which makes you delusional about the boundaries of relations, then it is something, no, you don't need to go there. Okay, how you can have more? There are many practices in Islam where you can have the one word for that, specific word is kashf. Kashf is something where you can get insights about specific things also, which you have no physically access, or you haven't, you have seen them or know them about. So you have this. Ram is completely forbidden. Like, okay, absolute no, absolute no in Islam. Haram. They would say that, but others will think about it and see. So these are the different ways to coming to that. Again, extremist mindset is not specific to any religion or mindset. Like, it's just common. Some
Correct.
people out of
Correct.
their goodness, they just go there to extreme, and sometimes lose the connectivity with the basic ideology. And
It's
it is
important
same for
to
Muslims.
understand
Yes.
extremism is in any religion.
Yes.
Correct.
And it is common, of course it is
Culture.
common to Islam also. Like, for Muslims, they have also, out of their goodness, like Christians, like Jewish people, like Hindus, they just want to be very devoted
Oh yeah.
practitioners, and then they get into like real extremes, which is, sorry,
Yeah.
lost connectivity with the
Inappropriate
basic
application
ideology.
of goodness, in other words. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
But about these things, Joseph, in the spiritual side of Islam, there are many practices where you can be, or anyone can become able to get access to different dimensions of reality. So they
Yeah.
also have that, but they don't use any external thing for that. They have a different way. They don't ingest anything. They don't eat anything. They don't smoke anything for that.
Yeah.
So there are different practices.
Yeah. Yeah. So the key point here is that much like in Christian culture, taking drugs, anything that distorts the mind and makes you not perceive things clearly is considered bad and sinful and evil, etc. And same logic, same logic. That's why,
And yes, just
cool.
want to add still one more thing
Yeah,
before,
yeah.
because the word ally in for Don Juan, I have seen in Muslim practices, like in Muslim culture, they use the word mawakkil. Mawakkil is the energy of something which can be at your side, and then of course can help you to access different realities, different dimension of realities, and yeah, realities of different dimension, both ways. So they are different, very, and I have seen that. So yes.
Wow. Wow.
Yes, like the whirling of dervish. Yes, dervishes are also, yes, dervishes are also, but they are different practices in terms of reciting, yes, and in terms of writing also. And sometimes just people can get like as a gift, and they give you something just by shaking hands, but just by looking at you. There are many ways to transfer that wisdom and that energy, especially mawakkils. They you can get access, anyone can get access to them by doing regular practice, and they are, I have seen that. So yes, I know about. So that the concept of allies and powers in Don Juan's book, in Islam they call them mawakkil.
Interesting. Very interesting. Let me answer the other question there. See if I just want to test my own understanding. Haram is orthodox, the equivalent term.
It is just completely forbidden. That's it. No question
Oh,
about
so
it.
it's unorthodox then. What is haram is what's forbidden. Okay, then I misunderstood. So haram is what's
Yes.
forbidden. I got you.
No chance. Sorry. It is exactly like eating pig for Muslims.
Prohibited,
Haram.
prohibited
No,
and
no
forbidden.
condition apply. Unless or until you are going to die after.
Yeah,
Yes.
interesting.
Like for
Interesting.
3 days, even the only condition is that you have no access to food for 3 days and you are about to die, then you can eat.
Wow.
Haram can only be halal. The opposite of haram is halal. Just only when your life is in danger. Then they can eat anything, of course.
Wow.
But otherwise, no. Sorry.
Interesting. All right. Very cool. Very cool. Very good to know. So I like to, you see, that's why I like to check, even though it's completely wrong. But now, through the emphasis of being completely mistaken, I now remember what it is. Yeah. So
Yes.
yes.
Haram means no.
Yeah.
Absolute no.
Haram means no. Absolute no. Forbidden, restricted,
Yes.
prohibited. Yes. Yeah. No, 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 no. Like this. No. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, the problem with Carlos is that he started this in the 60s. And by the time he came to publish that first book, the whole focus on drugs was a big deal. Now, keep in mind, back then, many of the drugs in the 60s weren't initially illegal, like LSD, right? It only became illegal later on. And and but because of this focus on it, and at that time, the drive was for spiritual reasons, personal growth, learning, expanding consciousness, expanding awareness. Those were the terms that was associated with drugs, right? So it's very different, very different. Then, of course, the church people got into it and said, no, it's evil, 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 and banned. Yeah. Now, and they say, well, they try to rationalize, say, well, it's bad for your health. Well, if it's bad for your health, then very old people should be allowed to take whatever drugs they like. That's not the case. Yeah. So sorry, your argument doesn't wash. Yeah. I mean, if you cross 100, what's your life expectancy? Yeah. And so what if you take drugs? If you're having fun and you're having a good time and it does affect your health, yeah, so what? See, so it's a bogus argument because they couldn't make this argument for the evil of it. So they shifted it into it's bad for your health, and that's how the laws got justified, right? And many people still believe this. Well, it's in your best interest, it's bad for your health. But there's no allowance in the law for testing and all of this stuff, right? Controlled studies and all that. It's a mess. So, but because it's ideologically driven, not driven by any other practical sensibility, and it's all because of this idea that taking drugs is evil and it's bad for you and mind. And they just fear anything that's different and unusual. It comes fear. It's that conservative, narrow mindset. And so they have to shut it down. It's a sad business. It's a sad business. Now, what I was saying with Carlos is, either fortunately or unfortunately, I think it's the magic of the universe that when he wrote the first book, as we see, right, he's completely focused on one aspect of the teachings, the ally, and, which comes from the power plant and all this. In other words, the drug angle. This is what made the book popular, because at the time, this was the thing. And this was the big who. And to this day, people remember, oh, Carlos, oh, he's the guy that was all about the drugs and the trips and all of the stuff, right? That's what they remember with Carlos. That's why I'm so keen to get through this first book, because the second book, we're going to go over the first 5 years again. We're going to go over the same time period, but from an entirely different perspective. I think there's still a bit of drug stuff in there, because he's still not out of that era, right? But that's the focus is now on the warrior's way, as Don Juan calls it, yeah, which is about character. And it's a very different understanding. He missed the character training. And this is what Way-Of-Impeccability and the Moreness Project, this is what it's about. Whether you want to do any type of alternate reality experimentation, that's up to you. Yeah, that's your freedom. That's your choice. How are you going to know to do this? Via attunement. Nobody can tell you. If attunement brings it into your path, then you do. That's it. There's no morality when it comes to attunement. There's no preset morality. There's just an understanding that whatever attunement brings to you is 100% appropriate, right, good, moreness, valuable. Whether you can see it now or not, that's a separate issue. And that's where we have to learn capital trust and learn to act without agenda. Because I'm not acting according to my agendas, because, well, what do I know what's good for me? And what I might think it's good for me, but I can't really know what's good for me. So attunement is the guide, right? And so it's a very different logic. And when you look at things via attunement, and then all of this other stuff falls away, and attunement will bring you what's appropriate for you. But in order to be able to live in attunement, you need to have your character sorted first. Right, Beena? Beena?
Yes.
Right. I'm saying in order to live in attunement, you have to have your character sorted first.
Yes.
There are some very necessary skills. For one thing, you need to have self-honesty. For two things, right, that's the start. In order to start with everything, that's the starting point, self-honesty. Then you need to understand, have awareness that has discernment with it and understanding. Because otherwise we can get caught up in bubbles. For instance, the bubbles of superiority paradigm. I'll give you an example, right? With superiority paradigm, you've got agree and disagree. That's what discussion is. Yes, I mean, you watch comments on posts. When you got like dozens or hundreds of people commenting, right? That's it. They agree or disagree. Nobody's making any effort to understand. They're not making any effort to elucidate. They're not making effort to expand, to add, to bring a different perspective. None of that. It's just all about agree and disagree. So if you want to really grow and live in attunement, you can't be stuck in this. Yeah? You have to have that openness to see beyond agree and disagree. You have to see understanding. You have to have that discernment ability. And you have to have the ability to perspective shift to multiple perspectives. To say, yes, your perspective is valid, but here's another valid perspective. Or this is a perspective that's valid, but it's in a bubble. Yeah? And there's a bigger bubble that encompasses this bubble, right? If you don't understand that, then we get lost in bubbles, and that's a very big deal. So I'm saying that, what we are sharing are the tools, not beliefs, not ideologies, but tools. The tools with which we can end up living in attunement. And those are tools of character, yes, tools of discernment, tools of awareness, tools of understanding, tools of being. Yes, just understanding the necessity for integrity, the necessity for it, yeah, all falls under the heading of the philosophy of appropriateness. And when we have this ability, yes, and we are free from petty ambitions, this is what really affects most people and why they cannot live in attunement, because they have too many ambitions. And look at you talked about the Christian fundamentalist movement. It is so far removed from Christianity. It's really sad. I am a great fan as a Christian. I'm happy to call myself. I'm also a Buddhist, but a true Buddhist, right? In terms of what Buddha taught, both, and they both coincide. They don't overlap. There's a much. I mean, they overlap. They're very similar. But Christianity and Christianity, two different things. Same as Buddhism. Yes, Buddhism is very different to Buddhism. I'm a Buddhist, not a Buddhist. Yeah? Because, in Buddhist religion, they got all those, I don't know how many levels of heavens and hells and layers and prayers and all that. Where did Buddha teach anything got to do with prayer? Not at all. Not at all. No worship, no prayer, no heavens, no hells, no nothing. This is all stuff that got added on afterwards. Yeah. People who suffer from traumas, or even those who learn, Joseph says, he said a previous comment. Joseph says, you also need more correct understandings or schemas. Precisely. And that is where the discernment comes from, and understanding the greater system. Now, the greater system is very self-evident once you really understand it. This is why Way of Impeccability is so potent. Yes, it's not only just character things, it's also understanding how the world works. And very, very early in the program, there's a major part of it, a focus on understanding the point and purpose of the universe of life. Yes. And when that it's self-evident and you go test it yourself, when that's connected to, then everything falls into place. And then you have this greater schema, right? As you call it. And this is absolutely essential, because then you know what it is you're doing. Then it comes from clarity of intent. See, once you setting your intent, what do I want? Really want? What can I really truly justify wanting? What is valuable and purposeful and necessary and justifiable to pursue in the greatest of all contexts? Yeah. You see, then you sort it all out. Now you know where you're going, and then the rest follows from there. So that's why the program is so powerful, Joseph, because it's taking all of these things and putting them together. You can't have one without the other, right? Yeah, that's very key. And then Joseph says, people who suffer from traumas, even those who learn incorrect schemas, like the John Wayne view of manhood, our culture exalts. Exactly. That's superiority paradigm, Joseph. That's why I keep talking about superiority paradigm. That macho, tough guy. It's all in some way, look how superior I am. That's it. It's all about this. I mean, and the same thing, agree and disagree. It comes from superiority paradigm. I'm right, you're wrong. This makes me better than you. Therefore, I'm higher, more superior than you. It's all part of the same underlying motivation, see? It's why understanding the superiority paradigm is very important. That's why in the Greater Moreness Project, the psychology of the superiority paradigm is one course. Yes, it's a program, a big major program. Then you've got capital H hearing, which is the finer points of discernment and perception and perspective shifting and more. It's really about, if you take it to its extreme, yes, it's through the filter of connecting, dealing with clients, but it's a spiritual course, because it's really, if you can learn to hear other people, truly hear them, taking yourself out of the equation, the same applies to the universe. So doing it with other people, it's a test, it's a practice. Yeah. So it's an incredibly spiritual program, but that's, to get to the end point there. And, like Don Juan says, you want to learn to stop the internal dialogue. If you want to truly capital H here, stop your internal dialogue. Yeah. Yesterday, you justly criticized modern therapeutic methodology. Yes, thank you for that, Joseph. But, really to be super precise there, I said traditional psychotherapy, traditional therapy. In modern times, it's still got a lot of that traditionalness in it, but it is starting to evolve very slowly. But so when you say modern, I'm a little bit more flexible on modern, because modern has some elements to it where they're starting to realize we got to do this differently. And there are some pockets of it that are really making a very, very concerted effort to break out of that traditional model. Anyway, you carry on to say, I didn't get to mention that I primarily use a form of therapy called schemas therapy and nature therapy, native values, and Don Juan's ideas. That's fantastic, Joseph. That's wonderful. That makes me very happy to hear. Yes, positive psychology, as I understand it, again, let me just before I say what I understand positive psychology to be, well, at least they're making an effort to not be focused on the negative. So in positive psychology, just in the name, there's already a change. But there came a time for me in my life, Joseph, where I had been immersed in seeking, learning, finding new ways, but always with an intent and a goal. And the goal was to find something that I could apply. Now, I didn't realize I had already created it myself. I was too humble. I never had an idea that I could create a whole system and a whole philosophy and everything. Never entered my mind. I only it was kind of forced on me to realize that, because I spent all my childhood, that's what I did, working the stuff out, thinking it through to the end. And anybody who says, oh, but you were a child, what do you know? Well, if you don't know that children can think, then go and think again, right? If they're not distracted, confused, and distorted by beliefs and ideologies, their thinking is fantastic, especially if they take it all the way through to the end, right? You figure it out, and that's what I did. And I got confirmation by the time I got to Carlos and Don Juan especially. He resonated because he was saying the same thing that I was saying. He just had nice language, which some I had, but I didn't quite have. And I searched for that. It was an intent. Before Carlos came, I set an intent. I was very disillusioned with reading all the classics. I got nothing out of it. Nothing. Yeah. And one of the criteria I wanted was a complete system that had good language and was a bit exotic. Those were my 3 criteria, and it's exactly what I got with Carlos. So for me, coming to Carlos was a product of intent, because it was a very, very powerful intent. Very, very, very precise, very clear, and I got all that. But in that resonance, I came to realize over time that, this is resonating with the philosophy I'd already put together. But in the philosophy that I had, there was a few things, it ends up a lot of things that were extra, yeah, and that fill in some of the holes in Don Juan's whole cosmology and system. So it's a wonderful system, but it's got problems, yeah. And the psychological aspect especially is a lot missing, yeah. It's there, but not so clearly and directly. And the language usage, I took that language usage and went further, went all the way with it into the language of conceptionality. Because now you've got a system, the language. When you learn a language, you don't learn necessarily the dominant religion of that language or the ideology. It will make it easier to understand that, yes, but the language is separate from that. Yeah? English is not a Christian language. English works just as well for learning about Buddhism. So when you learn the language, it allows you to go in any direction you want. Yeah? And that's what the language of conceptionality is. It's no ideology involved. It's a toolbox. It's language. Language is a tool. And this is something that I'm really bringing, Joseph, and I don't want to ring my own bell here because I really dislike doing that, but it's really important that I mention this. I'm just being accurate here and being honest, that this language of conceptionality is a transformative, not just psychological, but also philosophical, or not just philosophical, but also psychological, spiritual. It's spiritual, the language of conceptionality, because that's what actually allows us to connect to spiritual conceptions, and the ability to conceive. Yeah. So the language of conceptionality is not only learning the skills of being able to conceptualize, but to apply it and use it. And the psychology of language, when you understand it fully, and again, it'll be a long thing for me to go into, but this is what changes us in a very direct way. So part of the language of conceptionality is a mechanism that ensures you're going to change when you change your language. It's all hand in hand, it works. So it makes that strenuous effort that Carlos talks about, it takes a lot of that away. Why? Because when you really do it in this way, you're going to change automatically. It's a long explanation, but it's very powerful. So yeah, fun stuff, fun stuff. And to share this, the main thing that we wish to share, Moreness-Culture, the intent is to share an alternative. This is very important. See, because superiority paradigm, it leads us to assume that you saying your thing is more important. No, I'm not saying that at all. No, it's more important to me, but not more important in itself. Yes, I can show you reasons why I say this has value, but again, that depends on your personal choice. That's not my issue. The point is, and it's an alternative, not the alternative. Superiority paradigm will never say to you, hey, I've got an alternative here and it may or may not be better. No, superiority paradigm, whatever you are in, it's automatically better because that makes you superior. The point I want to share, and Beena too, is why we're sharing is an alternative, is because if there can be one alternative, there can be more. That's it. See? And that's very important. That's very important. It's like when Mescalito comes along as an entity, as a spirit, as an entity. If there can be one, there can be more. It changes the entire universe for Carlos. If one such can exist, one example of magic, of supernatural can exist, then it opens the door to everything else. See? That's why people are so scared of it. Because when you have one, can be more. Same thing. We are sharing an alternative paradigm. You don't have to get into our paradigm. Make your own paradigm. Just ignore my paradigm. But if you're aware that there can be an alternative, you can start looking for your own alternatives to the superiority paradigm. Because show me who really benefits from the superiority paradigm. A lot of people think they do, but when you actually examine their lives very closely, like I said, the example of the alpha lion, it's a stressful existence. It's just an idea that this is wonderful, but the reality sucks. Yeah. So wonderful, wonderful, Joseph. At some point, Joseph, you're more than welcome to come on Zoom again. You came once before. And you can tell us all about schema therapies, or schemas, plural, schemas therapy, and especially how you incorporate native values and Don Juanian values, ideas and tools. That should be fantastic. Yeah, we'll grill you. We'll grill you. You'll be our guest, and we'll interview you, and we'll ask you questions, and it'll be all about your particular style of therapy. And hopefully, in our sharing, or the tools that I'm sharing, I hope you find them useful. Capital H hearing, for anybody who's in any kind of therapy, I absolutely recommend come and do this. You're probably using some of it already, but, just at least from experience, everybody who's done it has been really benefited because it goes so much further than what's available, right, and what's out there. So it's a very sophisticated program, and it's a profound tool. Like I said, it's a spiritual endeavor in the overall. It's fantastically useful in any therapeutic counseling, life coaching. You can be in business too, just dealing with clients and customers, yeah, or employees or bosses. Either way, it's fantastically useful in life in general, but particularly in these fields. But of course, the key point is overall, it's a spiritual issue. It's a spiritual program. Very powerful, very powerful. Wonderful, Joseph. Wonderful. So yeah, I hope there's some value for you here. And if you do find some share, I'd love to hear this. I'd love to hear this. Very cool, very cool. So yeah, come on Zoom sometime and share with us. Where were we? We'll continue reading. Am I screen sharing? Yes, I am. Yeah. Beena, any comments before we go? Oh, I just love this. I love this kind of discussion. It's so brilliant. It's so brilliant. Yeah, yeah. You know, for me, I really try not to criticize, but when something is causing harm, believing it's doing good, yeah, you've got to say something. Yeah, I mean, if people are just misguided a little bit here and they're doing whatever and it's experiment learning, well, it's okay. But when you have something repetitively that's causing harm under the guise of doing good, and also those doing it should know better. The fact that they don't blows my mind, but so be it. You know, we learn ridiculously slowly because we get caught up in perpetuating that which has been established, and that superiority mindset. Here's authority, and you don't question, you do, and you apply. Yeah, there's no intent to improve, except those people who did start the thing, they had the intent to improve. But anybody else, their followers can't have this. It's too funny. All right. Do you remember where we were exactly yesterday, Beena? Fine, never mind. Never mind. I think Beena involved over there. I'll just continue here. We're looking at the summary. Wow, I'm getting a whole zillion load of notifications here. Who's notifying me? Okay, Beena, will you take care of all those notifications, please, if you don't mind? Yeah. I hope you hear me, Beena.
Yes,
All right. Anyway.
yes,
All right. Thank you.
yes.
All right. So we're going over the summary, and is Carlos is going over key things that happened and summarizing them. And he's talking about these experiences with Mescalito, peyote, the 4,4-I-Willemsai, if you want to be scientific. I'd also examined the component elements with attachment and accuracy. I perceived their stability, singularity, and lack of consensus very clearly. From my recapitulation of the experience, Don Juan emphasized the following. For the progression towards the specific, he gave positive emphasis to my account that I had seen Mescalito as an anthropomorphic composite. The bulk of speculation on this area was centered on the idea that Mescalito was capable of being a teacher and also a protector. In order to direct the progression towards a more extensive range of appraisal, Don Juan placed positive emphasis on the account of my journey, which obviously had taken place on the dependent range. He also put positive emphasis on my version of the visionary scenes I viewed on the hand of Mescalito, scenes that seemed to be independent of the component elements of the preceding ordinary reality. The account of my journey and the scenes viewed on Mescalito's hands also enabled Don Juan to direct the progression towards a more pragmatic use of non-ordinary reality. He first put forth the idea that it was possible to obtain direction. Second, he interpreted the scenes as lessons concerning the right way to live. Why this is of such a issue to Carlos, I don't know. I mean, come on, Carlos, people have been learning from their dreams for ages. And what do you get in a dream? But you get a vision, you get an idea that is metaphorical. Yeah, you get shown things in your dream. It's not literal, it's metaphorical. And Mescalito did the same thing. Again, language of conceptionality. See, the inability to conceive. That's why people struggle with dreams, because they're too literal. They don't have that abstract metaphoric mindset. When you understand this, and you understand the underlying intent, which is to give you a life lesson, which means changing your thinking, changing your way of being, changing your ideas, changing your beliefs, well, then it's kind of simple. It's pretty obvious. And when you understand the intent and purpose of the universe, life, everything is the enhancement, development of your awareness, you only have to look at these visions or whatever you heard, felt, experienced through the lens of what is it looking to do to enhance and develop my awareness. And then okay, I see. All right, duh. Then the lesson is very obvious, very simple. Yeah, very easy. So why it's such a big deal when you get the lessons from Mescalito and you get some of the stuff from your dreams? I don't know. A lesson is a lesson, no matter where you get it from, right? You get it from nature, from life. When things conspire, people call them omens. I say anomalies. Same logic. Something trying to teach you something in an abstract way, in a metaphoric way. Some ideas of my recapitulation, which dealt with the perception of superfluous composites, were not emphasized at all because they were not useful for setting the direction of the intrinsic order. Ah, boy, I just love this fancy speak, right? A whole sentence that says nothing but sounds fantastic. I mean, it does kind of say something, but still. The next state of non-ordered reality, the third one, was induced by the corroboration of the rule with the ally contained in the Tura Inoxia. The preparatory period was important and noticeable for the first time. Don Juan presented the manipulatory techniques and disclosed that the specific purpose I had to corroborate was divination. His previous directing of the three aspects of the intrinsic order seemed to have produced the following results. The progression towards the specific was manifested in my capacity to perceive an ally as a quality. That is, I verified the assertion that an ally was not visible at all. The progression towards the specific also produced the peculiar perception of a series of images very similar to those I had viewed on Mescalito's hand. Don Juan interpreted these scenes as divination, or the corroboration of the specific purpose of the rule. Perceiving that series of scenes entailed also progression towards a more extensive range of appraisal. This time, the range was independent of the environment of the preceding ordinary reality. The scenes did not appear to be superimposed on the component elements, as had the images I viewed on Mescalito's hand. In fact, there were no other component elements besides those that were part of the scenes. In other words, the total range of appraisal was independent. The perception of a completely independent range also exhibited progression towards a more pragmatic use of non-ordinary reality. And this is crucial. Yes, I mean, we get pragmatic use out of dreams. Why this is so revolutionary, I don't know, but it is for Carlos. Divining implied that one could give a utilitarian value to whatever had been seen. The divining implied that one could give a utilitarian value to whatever had been seen. This is revolutionary for Carlos. In Way-Of-Impeccability and Moreness-Culture, we're like, well, duh. But it's important, and this is the psychology that I bring, an understanding of the psychology, that understanding of things aren't obvious until they become obvious. They weren't obvious before they were obvious. Obviousness is retroactive in time. It's very peculiar. When something becomes obvious, it was obvious in the past to you also. Because your brain, it doesn't distinguish between now and then when it comes to obvious. Yeah. So it feels like it's always been obvious, even though you know from memory that it wasn't. Yeah. But it should have been obvious to you. And yes, it should have been obvious. It actually was obvious. You just didn't connect to the obviousness. That's why you experience it as being obvious backward in time. It's quite fascinating. But it's important to understand our psychology, how we relate to this, yeah, and this is something, this idea here that Carlos was sharing. It's not something that was obvious. This idea of being able to extract utilitarian value, to extract it, yeah, it's a big part of Way-Of-Impeccability. Yes, to extract them all. It's a tool, a very profound tool, and when we have that profound tool. When I watch TV, it matters not one iota what I watch. Pick any program, the worst one, and I can extract value from it. Yeah, I mean, part of that is the skill of perspective shifting too, which I've really cultivated and developed, right, Beena? I mean, I've made this into a really, really good skill. Yeah, and it's very valuable. It's just practice. I'm not a genius of any kind, or I'm not special. Just practice. Just doing things over time, thinking it through to the end, repeating it, practicing it. It's very simple. Anybody can do it, really, right? But when you have this intent, though, to extract value, that was always my intent. My intent wasn't to learn so that I can repeat. Never. Couldn't be bothered. Yeah. When I read all those classics, most people are reading the classics. What is their intent? To show how clever they are by being able to quote from it and repeat and tell you who said this and what said that. Your agenda is messed up. Poor intent. Yes, my intent was to learn and to truly learn, to grow, to change. And for that, you have to extract utilitarian value. Otherwise, it's not going to change. Yeah, you're just going to have something sitting in your mind, just an idea, a memory. It's useless, useless. So that's why, again, to emphasize that the entire Moreness culture, the entire way of impeccability, it is all about utilitarian, practical value. Practical, 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 practical. Without applications, all meaningless. Practical, practical, practical. Yeah, get it to do. And that's why belief is not an issue. It's why it's not an ideology, because beliefs aren't that practical. Yes, we act on beliefs. We act very profoundly. We can have our whole life ruled by beliefs. But what if your belief is wrong? Then you spent your whole life pursuing this thing you wasted all your time and energy. Not very practical. Yeah. I go for things that are practical, self-evident, much, much, much more valuable. All right. Perceiving that series of scenes entailed also a progression towards a more extensive range of appraisal. This time, the range was independent of the environment of the preceding ordinary reality. The scenes did not appear to be superimposed on the component elements, as had the images I had viewed on Mescalito's hand. In fact, there were no other component elements beside those that were part of the scenes. In other words, the total range of appraisal was independent. The perception of a completely independent range also exhibited progression towards a more pragmatic use of non-ordinary reality. Divining implied that one could give a utilitarian value to whatever had been seen. Oh, I repeat. Oh, but it's a good point to repeat. All right? You don't need divining to ascribe utilitarian value. That's what extracting the more means. Yes, you can attach utilitarian value. That's you. That's the skill that you do. It doesn't have to be intrinsic in it. Yeah. We can extract value out of anything when you learn to think in the abstract and think metaphorically. For the purpose of directing the progression towards the specific, Don Juan put positive emphasis on the idea that it was impossible to move by one's own means in the independent range of appraisal. He explained movement there as being indirect and as being accomplished, in this particular instance, by the lizards as instruments. In order to set the direction of the second aspect of the intrinsic level, the progression towards a more extensive range of appraisal, he centered the bulk of speculation on the idea that the scenes I had perceived, which were the answers to divination, could have been examined and extended for as long as I wanted, for guiding the progression towards a more pragmatic use of non-ordinary reality. On one place, positive emphasis on the idea that the topic to be divined had to be simple and direct in order to obtain a result that could be usable. So again, clarity of intent. And going all the way back to the Oracle of Delphi. There were other oracles, but the Oracle of Delphi, that's why it's the Oracle of Delphi, because there were others. People forget this. They think it was the only oracle, just the one that was the most famous. But there was an inscription on top of the cave when you enter into it, and I forget what it says. But the intent of that inscription was, the clearer your question, the better your answer going to be. Yeah. So clarity of intent, and the more clear you were within your intent of what you wanted to know, the better the oracle was able to give you a better answer. Right? Vague questions, vague answers. The topic had to be simple and direct in order to obtain a result that could be usable. Yeah, clarity of intent is so important. That clarity of intent is so crucial. It's why it is Module 1, Session 1, clarity of intent. It's everything follows from there. It changes the brain too. See, when we understand that brain change, the neurological aspect of it, when you have clarity of intent, you now are emphasizing this because you've thought it through, you figured it out, and you said, this is important to me. This is the key. This is the essence, this element. You're changing your brain. When your brain is now wired to that particular intent, you notice everything relative to that intent. You connect everything to that intent. Yes. And you're aware of things that connect to your intent that you weren't aware of before, because that's how the brain works. It's the most incredible thing. understanding this part of our psychology is absolutely crucial and essential to understand how exactly emphasis works. And what is it when you are emphasizing your particular, when you are developing clarity of intent, you are emphasizing what it is that is most important, necessary, valuable, awesome, fantastic, etc. for you. Yeah. But in intent, you can't just say, okay, you can say, well, I'm intending to have a Ferrari. That's fantastic. Yeah, but is it valuable? Is it right? Is it appropriate? Does it fit into the greater balance? Have you thought of the consequences? Do you want to pay the insurance, etc., etc.? See, when you think it through to the end, all right, never mind the Ferrari. Yeah, that doesn't really help me spiritually. But when we have clarity of intent, you've got to take all that into consideration. And when you're truly going, and then it all fits into. Now, your brain is geared to getting you what is absolutely valuable and awesome for you. Whether you now know what that thing is or not, you intending to get this. Now, life is easy after that. Life is easy after that, right? Very, very powerful. Yeah. The fourth state of non-ordinary reality was elicited also for the corroboration of the rule of the ally contained in the Tura Inoxia, Devil's Weed. The specific purpose of the rule to be corroborated had to do with bodily flight as another aspect of movement. A result of directing the progression towards the specific may have been the perception of soaring bodily through the air. May have been the perception, you coward, squirrely. That sensation was acute, although it lacked the depth of all earlier perceptions of acts that I had presumably performed in non-ordinary reality. Bodily flight appeared to have taken place in a dependent range of appraisal, and it appeared to have entailed moving by one's own power, which may have been the result of a progression towards the wider range of appraisal. I'd be curious to know if Carlos never had any flying dreams. I've had a good many of them, and they vary. And in some of those dreams, I was able to take off via an act of will. And I could feel it in my abdomen. I could feel the feeling of will and generating that energy, and I would zoom off and away and then be able to fly and do whatever. Right? But that ability, that was a very particular, very, very real feeling, which it's so real. If I know, if had I sufficient energy in this reality, I feel I'd be able to do that. All energy dependent. Yeah. It takes a great amount of energy. Yeah. But still, I mean, if you understand flying in your dreams, why is flying under these circumstances something so dramatically, it's almost traumatic for Carlos? I don't get it. Yeah. Maybe just me. Yeah. Bodily flight appeared to have taken place in a dependent range of appraisal, and it appeared to have entailed moving by one's own power, which may have been the result of a progression towards a wider range of appraisal. I don't know what that means, but all right, never mind. Two other aspects of the sensation of soaring through the air may have been the product of directing the progression towards a more pragmatic use of non-ordinary reality. Repeating again, they were, first, the perception of distance, a perception that created the feeling of an actual flight. The second, the possibility of acquiring direction in the course of that alleged movement. As a psychologist, not psychologist. Psychologist is one who applies a psychological system created by someone else. A psychologist is one who creates their own system, yeah, which are done. As a psychologist and someone who pays attention to psychology, this entire writing, if you look at the component elements here, I get a lot of clues or red flags that tells me a lot about Carlos. He's repeating certain things with a great amount of emphasis, not to emphasize the point, but saying it in a way that is just repeating, and it indicates that Carlos is not comfortable and he's trying to get comfortable. Yes. And when you look at this entire abstract summary, this whole last part of abstract analysis of what he's undergone, you see Carlos is struggling psychologically to come to terms with things. Yes. And he's looking to try and find ways to get comfortable with what he is very deeply uncomfortable with. Whenever you're dealing with somebody who's in a similar situation therapeutically, you'll see the same patterns, the same process, right? And this is part of capital H hearing. Pay attention to pattern, right? And if you're listening to somebody, which is where you can hear rhythm, yeah, it's sound is fantastic for hearing rhythm, yeah. Pattern also, of course, but pattern you can still perceive visually. Rhythm, not. It's missing from visual, from reading. So that's why capital H hearing is so powerful. When you're listening to a client, shut off your visuals, yeah, because our visual perception of people is way less accurate than our sound. Also, people have spent their whole lives presenting a visual facade, visage impression, which is not representative of who they really are. But when it comes to sound, very few make an effort to sound who they not are. And it's a lot more difficult to do. And even if they are doing this, there are other things that will give the truth away with sound, right? So when, of course, you're looking at intent, you're looking at implication, when you're listening, your brain is able to pull out those abstract conceptualities. Yeah, implication, for instance, what's not said. That's so much easier to do when you're not visually focused. Yeah, because we tend to be visually predominated. And when you make visual your primary, you have all those visual impressions coming in, and they cloud out everything else. And you can't even think in the abstract. You can't even connect to these implications and perceptions and morenesses, extrapolations, etc. Right? So very, very important. And interpolation, that's very important, right? Going the other way, going back inside to see what came before. Extrapolation is taking what you see and saying what's going to come after. Yeah, do it the other way too. Very handy for going inside people, right? Skills, 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 all in capital H hearing, right? All skills. During the subsequent preparatory period, Don Juan speculated on the supposedly deleterious nature of the ally contained in Datura Inoxa, and he isolated the following areas of my account. For directing the progression towards the specific, he placed positive emphasis on my recollection of having soared through the air. Although I did not perceive the component elements of that state of non-ordinary reality with the clarity that was customary by then, my sensation of movement was very definite, and Don Juan used it to reinforce the specific result of movement. The progression towards a more pragmatic use of non-ordinary reality was established by centering the bulk of speculation on the idea that sorcerers could fly over enormous distances, a speculation that gave rise to the possibility that one could move in the dependent range of appraisal and then switch such movement over into ordinary reality. A very complicated way of saying that you can fly in non-ordinary reality, in, let's just call it a dream world, and you're flying there, but you can end up in a different place in the ordinary world. You won't be flying through the air in the ordinary world like Superman. Yeah, you'll be flying like basically like taking a wormhole through non-ordinary space. When we think of a spaceship, we're like, that's what warping is. You're warping space, you're going through non-regular space, warp space, different space, but you end up, the end result, you pop out again into regular space. And now you've traveled a great distance in regular space that you can't do under ordinary means because you can't go faster than the speed of light. But when you warp space, you can do this. So in other words, going through an alternate space allows you to do something you can't do in regular space. Same principle with unordinary reality. You're flying in the unordinary reality, you're warping through there, and you're popping out in the other spot, and there you go. You're in a different place in the regular world. Same logic. I love how modern, like computer technology or just understanding computers, allows for an understanding of psychology and how we work. And the same way, space travel also through warp space and subspace, etc. Alternate realities. Warp space is an alternate reality. The laws of science work differently in warp space or subspace. Yeah? The laws of reality work differently in unordinary reality. Dream reality, call it dream reality if you want to. You can fly in dream reality. I can't fly in this reality. Things work differently. It's fantastic. Fantastic. Very useful. Very useful. Yeah. Yeah. The fifth state of non-ordinary reality was produced by the ally contained in Psilocybe mexicana. It was the first time that the plant was used, and the state that ensued was more in line with the test than an attempt to corroborate the rule. In the preparatory period, Don Juan presented only a manipulatory technique, as he did not disclose the specific purpose to be verified. I did not believe the state was elicited to corroborate the rule. Yet the direction of the intrinsic level of non-ordinary reality set earlier appeared to have terminated in the following results. One moment. Hydrogenated water. It definitely tastes a little nicer, I gotta say, than the regular water. But anyway, sometimes I choose to believe. Very powerful concept. We're going to come to via Don Juan. I love this, choosing to believe and having to believe, both two power conceptions. Anyway, I choose to believe that it makes a difference. It does for the taste, but well. Directing the progression towards specific total results produced in me the perception that the two allies were different from each other, and that each was different from Mescalito. Why this is important? I mean, they're different. Yes, so what? I mean, it's like, isn't that a duh? They're three different things. How are they not going to be different? Why is this necessary to be emphasized? Again, where I think Carlos doesn't really understand. He knows he doesn't really understand. And all of this fancy talk is to make it sound as if he does. And if there's something valuable and important here, he knows there's something valuable and important, but he doesn't quite know how to say it. So he says things like this, which sound fancy but mean nothing. It's really interesting to perceive Carlos's psychology here. I perceive the ally contained in Psilocybe mexicana as a quality. I also think that Carlos's psychology is affected by the universe. He's being used by the universe. This is my personal perspective. I have a lot to justify that, but still, when you think of it that way, I can't say it for sure, but all the evidence fits this hypothesis. Yeah. And when you do see it through that lens, you're like, it doesn't matter whether I can say it for sure is or not. The value I get out of it, that's valuable. Yeah, that doesn't change. The progression towards a more extensive range of appraisal resulted in the sensation that the total environment of the preceding ordinary reality, which remained within my awareness, was usable in non-ordinary reality. That is, the expansion of the dependent range seemed to have covered everything. The progression towards a more pragmatic use of non-ordinary reality produced the peculiar perception that I could go through the component elements within the dependent range of appraisal, in spite of the fact that they appeared to be ordinary elements of everyday life. Don Juan did not demand the usual recapitulation of the experience. It was as if the absence of a specific purpose had made this state of non-ordinary reality only a prolonged transitional stage. Yeah, there's no intent to it, what you're doing, then it's just practice, it's experiment, just comfort, etc. During the subsequent preparatory period, however, he speculated on certain observations he had made on my behavior during the course of the experience. He placed negative emphasis on the logical impasse that prevented my believing that one could go through things or beings. With that speculation, he directed the progression towards a specific total result of movement through the component elements of non-ordinary reality perceived within the dependent range of appraisal. Don Juan used those same observations to direct the second aspect of the intrinsic level, a more extensive range of appraisal. If movement through things and beings was possible, then the dependent range had to expand accordingly. It had to cover the total environment of the preceding ordinary reality, which was within one's awareness at any given time. The movement entailed constant change of surroundings. In the same speculation, it was also implicit that non-ordinary reality could have been used in a more pragmatic manner. Moving through objects and beings implied a definite point of advantage, who is what? Inaccessible to a sorcerer in ordinary reality. Don Juan next used a series of 3 states of non-ordinary reality, elicited by the Porphyry William Sy peyote, to prepare further the special consensus on the corroboration of the rule. These 3 states have here been treated as a single unit because they took place during 4 consecutive days. And during a few hours in between them, I had no communication whatsoever with Don Juan. The intrinsic order of the 3 states, hang on. The intrinsic order of the 3 estates. Oh, that's interesting. Not states, but estates. I wonder if that's a typo. Has also been considered a single unit with the following characteristics. The progression towards the specific produced the perception of Mescalito as a visible, anthropomorphic entity capable of teaching. The ability to give lessons implied that Mescalito was capable of acting towards people. The progression towards a more extensive range of appraisal reached the point where I perceived both ranges at the same time, and I was incapable of establishing the difference between them in terms of movement. In the dependent range, it was possible for me to move by my own means and volition. But in the independent range, I was able to move only with the aid of Mescalito as an instrument. For example, Mescalito's lessons comprised a series of scenes that I could only watch. The progression towards a more pragmatic use of non-ordinary reality was implicit in the idea that Mescalito could actually deliver lessons in the right way to live. During the preparatory period that followed the last state of non-ordinary realities in this series, Don Juan selected the following units. For the progression towards the specific, he placed positive emphasis on the ideas that Mescalito was instrumental in moving one through the independent range of appraisal, and that Mescalito was a didactic entity capable of delivering lessons by allowing one to enter into a visionary world. He also speculated on the implication that Mescalito had voiced its name and had supposedly taught me some songs. He didn't supposedly teach you songs, Carlos. Where did you learn those songs from? You learned them from Mescalito. You didn't get them anywhere else. It's not supposedly. He did teach you those songs. Whether Mescalito is a dream entity, a figment of your imagination or not, nonetheless, it still came from Mescalito. He said, supposedly taught me some songs. Those 2 instances were constructed as example of Mescalito's capacity to be a protector. And the fact that I had perceived Mescalito as a light was emphasized as the possibility that it might at last have adopted an abstract permanent form for me, which is a big deal, right? It means you've been accepted with this permanent form. All right, wow, that took a long time to read, and we'll continue tomorrow. I'm really keen to get through this, but, you know, my thoroughness and all right, there's not much more here. You know what? Let's finish. There's not more now. Yeah. Stressing these same units also served Don Juan in directing the progression towards a more extensive range of appraisal. During the course of the 3 states of non-ordinary reality, I clearly perceived that the dependent range and the independent range were 2 separate aspects of non-ordinary reality, which were equally important. The independent range was the area where Mescalito delivered its lessons. And since these states of non-ordinary reality were supposed to have been elicited only to seek such lessons, the independent range was, logically, an area of special importance. Mescalito was a protector and a teacher, which meant that it was visible, yet its form had nothing to do with the preceding state of ordinary reality. On the other hand, one was supposed to journey, to move in non-ordinary reality in order to seek Mescalito's lessons, an idea that implied the importance of the dependent range. The progression towards a more pragmatic use of non-ordinary reality was set by devoting the bulk of speculation to Mescalito's lessons. Again, when reading this, realize that Carlos is saying very simple things in fancy language. I mean, you're going into the whole intent of taking peyote is to learn from Mescalito. And people are doing it regularly because they do get lessons. Like, man, right? It's like was set by devoting the bulk of speculation to Mescalito's lessons. What else do you want to be bothered with? I mean, why? Don Juan constructed these lessons as being indispensable to man's life. it was a clear reference that non-ordinary reality could have been used in a more pragmatic manner to draw points of reference which had value in ordinary reality. It was the first time Don Juan had verbalized such an implication. Again, this big deal out of being able to get pragmatic value from non-ordinary reality. I don't remember this specifically, but there must have been a cultural idea pushed out that, oh, drugs is not worthwhile, it's not valuable because there's no actual value that you get out of it. You can't believe anything, you can't trust anything because it's all fictitious, it's all in your mind. Actually, now that I come to think of it, this was a perception. It's so ridiculous. I hadn't really focused on it. Right? So he's countering this objection towards drugs, which had come obviously from the religious side of things. They object simply because it's alternate, it's different, it's new, it's got implications, and it may lead to other things which contradict or give doubt to your religion. And this, of course, they cannot tolerate. They're so insecure. Yeah. So they have to counter, they bring up all these arguments, and this is what he's countering. It makes a bit more sense now why he's repeating on this so much. Yeah. The subsequent states of non-ordinary reality, the ninth in the teachings, was induced in order to corroborate the rule of the ally contained in the Tura Inoxia. The specific purpose to be corroborated in that state was concerned with divination. Again, he's repeating. See what I mean by the repetition? Yeah, it's not repetition that's epistrophic, that's meant to emphasize and elucidate, or not repetition because he's coming at it from different perspectives. Just repetition. It's just because he's struggling to get clear about it. The specific purpose to be corroborated in that state was concerned with divination, and the previous direction of the intrinsic level ended in the following points. Didn't we read this already? Yeah, we did.
Yes, it seemed like yes.
Yeah, I think there's a repeat in the text here.
Oh.
Some typo. Hi. Yeah, it's all repeating. The last experience recorded in my field notes was a special state of ordinary reality. Don Juan produced it by isolating component elements of ordinary reality through the process of cueing. Yeah, he actually uses the words cueing. Should be an E in there, right? C-U-E. Cueing about his own behavior. The general processes used in directing the intrinsic level of non-ordinary reality produced the following results during the course of the second special state of ordinary reality. The progression towards the specific resulted in the easy isolation of many elements of ordinary reality. In the first special state of ordinary reality, the very few component elements that were isolated through the process of cueing about the environment were also transformed into unfamiliar forms deprived of ordinary consensus. However, in the second special state of ordinary reality, its component elements were numerous, and although they did not lose their quality of being, familiar elements, they may have lost their capacity for ordinary consensus. Such component elements covered, perhaps, the total environment that was within my awareness. And this is what he's talking about when La Catalina came and imitated Don Juan. He thinks it's Don Juan who was pretending to be La Catalina imitating him. But anyway, he doesn't yet know La Catalina is an actual person. Don Juan may have produced the second special state in order to strengthen the link between ordinary and non-ordinary reality by developing the possibility that most, if not all, of the component elements of ordinary reality could lose their capacity to have ordinary consensus. In other words, reality is not fixed, it's fluid, what Jesus teaches. And it's an old idea going way back when into Vedic, it's been around for a long time, right? In other words, the world, it does not work the way we think it does. It's not as rigid as we like to believe, yeah? From my point of view, however, that last special state was the final summation of my apprenticeship. The formidable impact of terror on the level of sober consciousness had the peculiar quality of undermining the certainty that the reality of everyday life was implicitly real. This was Don Juan's intent. to put that major crack in Carlos's worldview. Yeah, Carlos says it here, right? He's not realizing that this was the intent of that whole thing, right? Let me read that sentence again. The formidable impact of terror on the level of sober consciousness, on his level of sober consciousness, had the peculiar quality of undermining the certainty that the reality of everyday life was implicitly real, and the certainty that I, in matters of ordinary reality, could provide myself with consensus indefinitely. In other words, Carlos is now really put out because that certainty, which is that feeling of rightness and superiority, yes, and trust and confidence, etc. This is now, you cannot be certain about what you thought you could be certain about all your life. Very devastating for a psychology, especially one that's connected to the superiority paradigm. Very, very psychologically distressing, right? Up to that point, the course of my apprenticeship seemed to have been a continuous building towards the collapse of that certainty. He's starting to realize Don Juan's intent to collapse his worldview. That's very interesting that he actually uses the word collapse here. I didn't remember that, but yeah. Right? The certainty, I mean, to say collapsing one's worldview is a much more encompassing term, of course. Don Juan used every facet of his dramatic exertion to accomplish the collapse during that last special state, a fact prompting me to believe that complete collapse of that certainty would have removed the last barrier that kept me from accepting the existence of a separate reality, the reality of special consensus. And again, like I said, Carlos has got a major inhibition towards accepting the existence of a separate reality. That whole, I mean, Carlos comes from a very deeply religious culture, right? Grew up Roman Catholic. And this whole idea of anything other than the reality which the church tells you is a no-no. That's it. It's a no-no. Anything other than the reality of the church and religion, anything else is evil, bad, wrong. Yeah, very big deal. Okay. Appendix B, outline for structural analysis. It's just summarizing the points here. I'm not going to read through them because just a summary, and there's no real point to it. And beside, it's an emphasis on all of this that it doesn't really have very much value. Yes, it is. It has value from an academic point of view. But our purpose here is not to understand this to be able to say, oh, we know what Carlos's book is about. No, our purpose here is personal learning and growth, right? That's our purpose. And I want to emphasize this, right? And particularly, we are reading Carlos, as Beena says, to know Don Juan. But the greater intent is to connect Don Juan and Don Juan's teachings and use it as a component element of Moreness-Culture. Look, I'm talking like Carlos now, component element. Right? We are going to elucidate, we are going to share, we are going to point out how Don Juan is a component element. It's an aspect, a part of Moreness-Culture. There's more to Moreness-Culture than all of the Moreness that Don Juan shares. Right? Very important to understand. Beena, will you please comment, share? I'll be back in a second.
Yes, as Syl was saying about the intent, and every single time when I emphasize on that okay, we are doing this special capital R reading to connect with Don Juan, because again, mediums can vary. We might be using whatever mediums. Okay, we don't know yet. Okay, I cannot say with certainty that, oh, it's all about the herbs and the plants and all that. No, I don't know what else he's using. And even like whatever he's going to use, it's not about the medium, it's about Don Juan's understanding, his ability to understand, his ability to explore, and his ability to be open for moreness. Because otherwise, one cannot learn if we don't have that openness to learn new, to update. We cannot actually invent anything. All the invention, all the growth was coming from the openness to the new. And this is what really interesting for me. Yes, again, as Syl was mentioning, that a lot of religious obligations, cultural obligations, personal obligations. Um, Me personally, I feel very secure in my understandings that, okay, you are doing your things. Like Don Juan, he is using all these mediums. I connect with his intent, not with the mediums. Okay, mediums,
There you
okay, yes,
go.
this is what.
There you go.
And also,
Yeah.
yes, and I also feel privileged that even Carlos and Don Juan and other people, they are the one who really did all the hard work, not only the hard work, but all the dirty job also
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
Not just having all the nice things presented to us, and now we are exploring this. Okay, so you did this and you did that, and how you did that, and all these things. But actually, what they were doing was a real messy job, because it needs a lot of effort, it needs a lot of courage, and it needs a lot of hard work. And they were doing that, including Don Juan, and of course other, and of course his lineage. Not only him, because I only know him, so I'm talking about him. But of course, he was getting it from his lineage. So like these guys are really, really respectable people for me, because I do respect them. That they put their life in danger to explore all these things, to experience, and then after that they were sharing. Amazing. I really, really respect them. Yes, again, as I said that, okay, not necessarily I'm going to practice all that, because this is not the main focus or the intent
Correct.
of reading this.
Correct. Correct.
My intent is to understand.
Yes.
I do understand from Don Juan that the other reality, the alternative reality exists.
Yeah.
And this gives me openness to other things also,
Correct.
to possibilities.
Correct.
If some part
Correct.
of the other or alternative reality they explore, it doesn't mean that of course there are no more other realities or dimensions
Correct.
of
Correct.
realities doesn't
Correct.
exist. It gives me hope.
Yes.
It gives me the sense of
Gives you option.
understanding of possibilities and opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Just because it exists doesn't mean we have to use it. All depends on the intent. All depends on appropriateness.
Exactly. Exactly.
And in this context, all depends on attunement. Yeah.
It is exactly like when I'm sitting here in my country, in my city, in my home, in my room. I'm sitting here and I have connectivity with Syl, with Joseph, with Norma, with Cher, and of course a lot of other people. And of course through them, Don want to see I, in according to my senses, conventional way of having a proof of something exist, really exist. I cannot touch, okay? I cannot hear them directly. It is coming via medium. Okay, this medium is technology in this case. I trust that because it has been proving itself as trustworthy, this technology. But if you ask me that personally, no, I don't know. Okay, I haven't seen that. But does it mean that they don't exist? They do exist. It is exactly like that. That trust. And of course, it's not a blind trust. It's been proven by practicing, by exploring other options, and of course, by checking and thinking it through to the end. This technology has proving itself that yes, it can actually, because I am at the receiving end, and still on the other hand, he is also checking it that okay, oh, does it really make sense that okay, oh, Beena is not a bot, not a AI
Always.
generated thing. So
Yeah.
see, but now we have this trust. Exactly same. This also applies to what Don Juan is saying.
Yeah.
I don't have any fear of like, oh, I'm trusting those people whom I never met. So when I don't have any fear of connecting with these people, why I would have any fear with understanding and exploring what Don Juan is sharing? For me, it is same. Trust. Trust not only on that, okay, on those things, but on my ability to pick and choose and thinking
Exactly.
it through to the end.
This is essential to Moreness culture.
Yes.
This ability to pick and choose. Otherwise, we end up becoming followers. And the moment you
Yes.
become a follower, you end up in a system. Doesn't matter how wonderful, big, and complete that system is, it's still closed. And there's always more, right? And then you get a bit stuck and you get a bit lost. So we have to be very careful of that. So this ability to pick and choose is very, very crucial. Not just the ability to pick and choose, but hand in hand with that, the psychology goes the ability to innovate, to infer, to connect, to be creative, to be inspired. All of it goes along with that mindset, that psychology, the brain training to pick and choose. All part of the same thing. Yeah, very, very, very important. Very important. Yeah, very, very important. Please continue, Beena. Sorry, I'm just emphasizing what you're saying there.
No. I was just filling in when you were not here.
Yes,
So,
acting without
it gets a bit long.
expectations is Joseph. Yes, yes. You know, Joseph, my number one rule for relationships is no expectations and no obligations. Yes, it's very difficult to actually have this 100%, but to get there as close as you possibly can. No expectations, no obligations. Think of a relationship, yes, and you wake up in the morning and you have the full awareness, yes, that you are in that relationship because you choose to be. Furthermore, you are free to leave. Every single morning, you're free to leave. In other words, you have no expectations and no obligations in that relationship. And yet you choose to stay. Choose. See? Deliberate choice. When you are deliberately choosing to be in a relationship every day, every moment, of course, it's going to be a wonderful relationship. And you cannot complain. I'm choosing to be here. If you have no complaints, well, where are your arguments and nonsense and strife and stress and trouble going to come from? There aren't going to be anybody. Yeah. So when we understand this point about expectations, it's very, very, very profound to act without expectations, and also to have that acting without assumptions. Yes. And acting without feeling like you're obliged. That's it. Incredible, right? That's freedom. That's freedom. That's freedom. And when you combine this with deliberate choice, deliberate living, that's what deliberate living then becomes. It's to live disconnected from expectations, obligations, assumptions. Maybe not so much the assumptions, because that's an extra skill that we have to
Today,
practice.
first time.
Very powerful. Go ahead.
Yes, today for the first time, Syl, I feel no resistance towards because there was always a resistance towards no expectation, no obligation. Because I personally feel that okay, there are always some expectations to be sensible, expectation to be honest, expectations to trust, and so these type of expectations are there, and of course appropriate. So these were the expectations. So I always like, oh no, there are always some expectations, obligations. I feel obliged to be honest with the person whoever I'm interacting with. I feel that this is something. Yes, not in the conventional way, of course, like okay, oh, it's an obligation, I have to be. No other obligation than my personal obligation towards myself. This is my choice. Okay, you said that, and but today when you said that, act without expectation.
Yeah.
Now I fully 100% without any resistance agree with that.
Correct. It's
Yes.
our choice.
Yes.
Based
I
on
do
our
have,
expectations
even
that
though
make the
I
difference.
do have some expectations, but I act without expectations because I have no authority
Exactly.
over other
Exactly.
person. So I'm not expecting anything from them.
Yes.
When I'm
Yeah.
acting like, okay, I'm doing something, like I'm honest in my relationship with and everyone, like with you, Joseph, with Norma, with Cher,
Yeah.
with Syl, when I am, because for me, of course, these are all relationship. We are connecting. Every connection is a relation. So anyway, so when I'm interacting, I'm communicating. I don't expect that you are going to be the same for me. You are going to do the same for me. No. So
Exactly.
when I'm acting, I have no expectation.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that I don't have some
Yeah.
expectation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yes, today
Even
I agree with you,
yes.
sir.
Yes.
Because
And
this was something. No, sir. No, we do have some expectation. Always like
yes,
that.
yes, you always had that qualification there. Yes.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
when we think about this in depth, yes. When I
Yeah.
have no expectations in my relationship, right? So take relationship with Bunny.
Hmm.
Why what was Bunny's name? Cloud, right? Or
Yes.
or my dog. Yes. A lot of people have dogs.
Hmm.
Dogs aren't always honest. Anybody who's had a dog knows that sometimes your dogs can be very profoundly dishonest. Yeah.
Yes.
Does that mean that when your dog is being dishonest and you suddenly realize this, do you stop loving your dog? Do you stop being in a relationship with the dog?
No.
No. Same with your bunny, right? Your bunny,
Yes.
it could try and disguise its intent to get what it wanted, knowing that you didn't want it to want what it wants. But yeah, so it was subversive. It was
Yes.
dishonest, in other words. Yeah. So, but it
Yeah.
didn't change your. Now you have a different expectation of Bunny that you might not have had before. But despite you expecting Bunny to be sensible and honest, despite knowing that you can't really expect this, you still choose to maintain the relationship. That's what I mean by no expectations. Yeah, you don't have an
Actually,
expectation
very diplomatic.
consistency.
Sorry.
See, very what?
Yes. Yes. Sorry. No, I was saying that my bunny was very open and adamant about things. When I
Yeah.
said, okay, you cannot enter in my room, he said, okay, when I'm out, you cannot enter in the whole house. Stay in your room. Really. He made
Beena,
it
Beena's
possible,
like
like
Dr.
really
Doolittle, by the
impossible.
way, and the bunny obeyed Beena, which is quite incredible.
But he gave me very tough time because when he was out and roaming around in the house and playing and all that, I cannot go out of my room. No.
Wow, that's reciprocity. So Bunny's saying,
Oh,
hey, you want to make
yes.
these rules for me? You got to have them for yourself too.
Serious bites. Serious bites.
Isn't that
He was
amazing?
not entering in my room. I cannot go out when he's out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Isn't that incredible? The
Yes.
world does not work the way we think it does. Beena and the
Yes.
bunny, you got to write this out as a story, by the way. It's the most
Just
incredible.
one time I said, okay, sorry, you are not allowed in my room. And he was actually sitting on the boundary, like really at the doorstep.
On the
And I said,
threshold.
no, sorry, because you were chewing my cables and everything. So no, you're not allowed here.
Wow.
He listened and never enter in my room again. But I was not able to allowed to go out when he was out. Yep, sorry. He's starting really biting me like with blood and the really serious bites. No, you will not come out. So yes, you are right, sir. We
Yeah.
assume things on other people's behalf.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Wow.
Anyway,
See how
thank you
this
so
is,
much.
right? But I'm
Yes.
making the point that we have expectations of sensibility and honesty. However, those are like you can call them sub expectations. Now, of course, you can get locked into them. But when we have the greater understanding of in the overall, I have no expectation, even though I have sub expectations, then it gets very powerful. Yes. Yes, I expect you to behave sensibly, but also I know in my deepest heart that you may not, you may behave differently to that for whatever reason. right? So,
Yes.
yeah. Yeah. Very powerful.
Okay. Yes, I gotta go, Syl.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, we're done. We're done.
Yes.
Okay. Just had to type something really quickly. Very cool. Again, Joseph, thank you very much. You always bring so much, and it's just wonderfully leveraging. It's excellent. Moreness. Too wonderful. Too brilliant. And Norma, we miss you. I know Norma said she watched later. And we always love when you're here. So, and we'll see other people other times. So brilliant. I love it. Everything magical. And now from tomorrow we can start on book 2. Finally.
Finally.
And my invitation for you to come and share about schemas, plural, schemas therapy. This would be great, Joseph.
Oh,
I would
yes.
love to hear. And specifically how you are incorporating what you said, the moreness that you bring into schemas, right? And this is what's magical about moreness. There's no followers of moreness. Once you understand, and then, well, like that, you are applying moreness, just in particular ways. And of course, in Moreness-Culture, there's more than what we know at first. So there's always more to apply. But, so how you apply moreness, in other words, into what you're doing, right? Very cool. Oh, you typed schemas. I thought so, but I read exactly, or I tried to. So I was interested to see that, and I was repeating how you said it. But yeah, schema therapy, that makes much more sense to me than schemas therapy. Yeah, that would, just in the way that these types of naming conventions work, it would be typically schema. But I give preciseness. It's part of capital H hearing. It's a good skill to have, to be able to read and read precisely. Read what is there, not what should be there. Yeah, I mean, it should have been that, but okay, typos, they happen. So I couldn't be sure in this case that it was a typo or not. Schema therapy, yes. So please come anytime, Joseph. We just that day we'll just do it about that, and we'll continue with our capital R reading the next day. So yeah. Very cool. All right. If you want to, of course, it's up to you. Yeah. I mean, the invitation is there, and it's a standing invitation. All right. On that note, we'll end it, and we'll continue with book 2 tomorrow. Before we go quickly, just want to say hello to Dushkatari. Always love seeing you here. Love seeing you here, Dushkatari. Yeah. You're just a wonderful person. So always a joy when you come. And then we say hello to Pegadusa as well, or Pegad USA. I don't know, could be. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Either way, happy to have you here and welcome. Hope we'll see you again. All right, so tomorrow we start really into a journey into an alternate reality. Now, I want to emphasize this alternate reality from our perspective is going to be an alternate reality of a way of being, not a magical drug trippy alternate reality. That's going to be in there somewhat too, but the alternative reality of an alternative paradigm of being. This is important. Okay, that's what we're going to venture into tomorrow. Very important. Very, very important. All right. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye, Beena. Bye-bye. See you.
Bye for now.
Yes. Bye for now.
See you guys tomorrow.
Yes.